really buy in political experience. And I think that as a elected politician in this race, I think I can bring an understanding of how you operate at the top level of global politics, having been both Trade and Defence Secretary for a G7 country.
OK, but what about your support for Brexit? You're a strong and ardent Brexiteer. Do you think that's going to work against you? Because it's not really in the spirit of globalisation, is it?
Well, it depends what happens post-Brexit, doesn't it? It's interesting that the only time in my 65 bilaterals that the issue really comes up is when talking to journalists. So I don't think it really matters, because I think it's not the address of the next DG that matters. It's what agenda they bring with them and whether or not they can actually carry that agenda through.
OK, well, let's have a look at some of the key challenges that are facing the World Trade Organization. Massive mistrust between China and the US and China and the EU. How would you address that?
Well, I think the biggest problem, the word he uses, trust, I think is key. A lot of members feel that they are not properly listened to at the WTO. The view amongst members is that small countries that cause trouble get listened to, big economies get listened to, but lots in the middle don't have their voice heard. So I think there is a mechanism that needs to be developed at WTO to get countries' voices properly heard. Then there is, of course, the dispute resolution mechanism that needs to be dealt with. To have a rules-based system but no mechanism to resolve disputes is very difficult. Then you have, as you mentioned, some of the bilateral issues between members. I would like to see them solved within the trading system, but countries, of course, have their ability to bring disputes bilaterally with one another. They have done so in tariffs in this case. I think that in terms of the US-China, we have to ask whether the economic cost of maintaining tariffs at 28% or so is actually going to be viable in the post-COVID environment, given the slump in the global economy. And generally, the way that trade disputes, trade wars tend to finish is because the cost becomes too high and the parties negotiate a solution.
OK, I mean, you mentioned the dispute mechanism there. The US, of course, has muzzled the WTO's highest court, the appellate court. Some say there's some merit to it, that the WTO has gone beyond its mandate. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And I think that's a reasonable criticism. I think you have to go back to why we created the appellate body. It's because the panels system was regarded as too political. The appellate body was brought in to be a much more narrow definition of the global trade rules. The United States and others feel that some of the judgments taken by the appellate body went beyond that strict remit. And there's a second complaint, which I also think is legitimate, which is it takes too long for disputes to be resolved. And if you think about that, if you're a big economy and you think you have a 3.5-year head start, where if you break the rules, you can get a competitive advantage, there's a fair chance that you might choose to do so. So speeding it up and tightening it up are key elements.
OK, just one final question, if I can. How relevant is the WTO in this day and age? It's last international, well, there hasn't been any international agreements on trade since 2015.